Welcome to the Coach V Show, where today we are going to be featuring Sister Sui Lang Panoke, who is an executive with Zion's Bank in Utah, and she is everything DEI. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Her insights and her perspective, as well as her experience, significance, and success, is going to be some great modeling for me who did the interview, and then also for all of you to consider that if you should find value, that you subscribe and deploy it all over your life, leadership, and business here on the Coach V Show, where iron sharpens iron. Together we rise, empowered by the Island City Media Group, where the beach meets the streets. And now, a word from our sponsor. Welcome to the Coach V Show, your Hollywood radio show for personal development with expert insights and interviews to help you, me, and we work to be our best and live our best life, offering for your consideration through some of my insights, but definitely through our featured guests, these success frameworks, behavioral models, and life lessons that if you should find value in them, that you subscribe and deploy all over your life, leadership, and business. Here on the Coach V Show, powered by Island City Media Group, where the beach meets the streets. And today I am juiced to have an executive and a former person who was on the Capitol doing amazing work there, here and featured on the Coach V Show. Sui Lang Panoke is a visionary leader and social entrepreneur with a passion for empowering today's leaders to rethink, create, and innovate. As Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Zion's Bank, she is responsible for directing the bank's strategic vision to champion diversity, equity, and inclusion across the organization and the communities in which they serve. Panoke is now the founder of Rethink International, hardware creative collective, Rethink Tank, and women's politics media. She has trained thousands of leaders around the world, leading in politics, business, government, nonprofits, and the media on a wide range of global leadership, strategic communications, and diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. She holds a bachelor's in political science from the University of Utah, shout out Utes, and an MPA from American University Women in Politics Institute. She serves on numerous community and nonprofit boards and was awarded the 2022 Pathfinder Leadership Award by the Salt Lake Chamber. Sui Lang is a proud mother of an intellectually curious teenage daughter, Keilala de Rel Kai Ui Lani Alakai Ren, who is a taller, smarter, and much more mature than she is. After living in Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., for 13 years, they have moved back to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood in Salt Lake City, Utah, with their red toy poodle, Rue. Kayla is now a sophomore at a proud Bruin, studying at UCLA, business economics focus at UCLA. Welcome to the Coach V Show, Sui Lang Panoke. Welcome to the show, sister.
Well, aloha, everyone. Wow, I am really feeling the love and the vibes and the spirit in which you made that introduction. I have a feeling you can make anything exciting and enthusiastic. Truly an honor to be here, Coach V.
Sui Lang, what's your genesis point? Like, tell us what part of Polynesia you're from, where were you born, introduce us to your parents, and where did it all start, please?
Great question. So I identify as Native Hawaiian, Filipino, Chinese, Irish, Spanish descent. My mother comes from the beautiful island of Oahu. Her family is in Wahiawa. And then my father's also from Oahu, from Nanakuli. And so both Native Hawaiian descent. My mother's father's side is the Filipino side, and then my father's side has the Irish, Chinese, a little bit of everything else. So I kind of still am working through identifying, what am I? Who am I? I'm multicultural in many respects. Although I was born in Honolulu in the islands, I was actually raised in the mainland here in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so I'm the haole amongst all my cousins. And then my daughter is half Black. And so a lot of my closest friends and family that I consider Ohana identify as Black. The majority of work that I've done in politics has been with the Black community as well. So I sit a lot of intersectionalities when it comes to identity, culture, and experience. And so I bring that all to the table in the current role that I'm serving in.
I love that. Introduce us to your parents. And since I butchered your daughter's name, please forgive me, sister, out there at UCLA doing your thing. Please introduce us to your parents' names and your daughter's name. How do I say that correctly?
Yeah, so my daughter's name is Kalela.
Kalela.
So it's like Ka and then Lay and then La. Super easy.
I can do that.
Yeah, Kalela Dayrell Ka'iulani Alakai Ren. So my full name is Sui Lang Okalani Pumehana Panoke. So my middle name, I was named after the last reigning queen of the Hawaiian Islands, Queen Liliuokalani. She didn't have any children of her own, but the heir to her throne was her niece, Ka'iulani, Princess Ka'iulani. And so my daughter carries her name as her middle name. So that's the background significance of that. My father's name is simply Abraham Panoke. No middle name, super simple, from Nanakuli, and he's probably the most Hawaiian guy I've ever met in my life. Simple lifestyle, all he needs is a comfortable chair, a good book, and some good food. And he's a happy guy. So that's my father. And then my mother, Dolores Pela Matalora is her maiden name. And so that's the Filipino side of our family. She comes from maybe 13 siblings. And really big family back in Hawaii, and I just have one brother, so we're like the small haole family from the mainland.
So born in the islands in the 808, raised in Utah, right? Very different climate, very different radio stations and TV shows when you turn on the TV in both of those places. And I love the fact that you're always talking about identity. Talk about growing up as a native Hawaiian, Filipino, Spanish, right? In Utah, but born in Hawaii. Talk about that experience and what life lessons you gained from that.
Yeah, well, as a woman of color, just in general, growing up in a place like Utah, where it's predominantly, white, neighborhoods and communities, although we are diversifying quickly. 1 in 4 Utahns identifies as a person of color now. That's really exciting for leaders like me to see. We have the strongest economy in the country. We are the fastest growing state over the past 10 years as well. And we're also the youngest state in the nation. And so there are a lot of unique respects about Utah that really lends itself to the work that I do. But as a woman of color, I quickly recognized disparities that existed amongst women, people of color in positions of power in particular, and particularly in the political arena. And so we didn't have a lot of leaders like me that looked like me or talked like me, thought like me, serving in our legislature. And I also quickly recognized the influence and impact that public policy has on our lives, just as constituents, as members of any community. And so that kind of fueled my passion to pursue a career in politics. And, that led to a whole host of other experiences and that have shaped me into the leader that I've become now. And so I really appreciate this question because it's caused me to kind of reflect on how my thoughts, my perceptions have evolved over time. So when I was younger, I always saw myself as different, oftentimes felt alone, like the only, left out, almost even unintentionally excluded from certain groups or situations, conversations. Whereas now I've kind of flipped that on its head and
Mm,
I've used it to my advantage since I am different. I still find myself sometimes being the only woman, the only person
right,
of
right.
color, the only Hawaiian, Pacific Islander in a lot of these conversations. So they use it to my advantage as what that which makes you different is what makes you valuable as a leader. And so I had something to teach all of my colleagues in that space, recognizing the
Mm,
commonality, right, that brought us all together in the first place, which was generally the mission or vision for whatever organization, you know what I mean, had brought us together.
I love that. So talk about that feeling and of seeing the progress and or accomplishment in terms of what you're charged to do there from being a youngster and you see disparity to now seeing it as valuable and
Mm.
now making sure that you harness all of those all of that value and then injecting it into opportunities for others, bettering the community, right? All those positives. Talk about how that makes you feel.
Oh my gosh. It is very satisfying. Very
Mm,
satisfying. And I consider myself very privileged and very blessed to have experienced something like that. There's so many of our predecessors who have championed equity,
right,
equality, social, racial, economic justice that haven't seen the amount of progress that you and I have seen in our lifetimes, right?
right,
And even over the past the 2-3 years since 2020 facing that pandemic, the how that has catapulted, right, a cultural shift across America and particularly in corporate America on racial equity, economic inclusion, all of those things. So deeply satisfying. Yet it's always important to continue to remember the work has not been
yes,
completed. There's
unfinished.
so much work that
Yeah,
needs to continue to be done, but it's just a really beautiful, wonderful feeling to know that the work is working. And if we can just continue down this path, and as leadership starts to retire and then new leadership starts to replace some of these critical roles in our society, we'll just start to see an even more significant shift in all of
yeah.
these things that we're working towards. So super exciting to me. One other thing I wanted to note, since I work in the banking financial services industry now, Utah ranks fourth in the nation in terms of asset management. So the
Mm,
banking financial services industry is thriving here in the state of Utah. It's pretty much the best place to move and set up a bank.
right.
um, Utah will also be, and also want to know, since I work at Zion's Bank, we celebrate 150 years in business this year in 2023. So we're the
Congratulations.
largest
Yeah.
bank in the state of Utah. We are ranked nationally. We're a community bank and really prides itself on serving the community and investing in the community. Utah will also be home to our nation's next Black-owned bank. And so that is groundbreaking. And this will be the first time in our nation's history that a white-owned bank has been acquired and will be converted into an MDI, which is Minority Depository Institution. Now, if you
Right.
do the research, the history, MDIs were historically set up to serve those underserved communities, very
Right.
vulnerable populations. And so they're predominantly founded in majority ethnic minority communities, Hispanic, Black or brown, Hispanic or Black communities. Whereas in Utah, it's the complete opposite. This bank will be starting off on the plus side of their balance sheet. It's in very good standing. And what that says to me, and just process this for a moment, there's value in being Black owned,
Right.
right?
Right.
That to me is evidence that we're seeing that shift in economic power.
Mm,
That is significant. And for that to be happening in the state that I'm living in, I mean, that's like a dream come true for me.
yep.
So every day
Well,
is exciting.
that's amazing. That's amazing to hear that, right? Because definitely in the land of milk and honey, in the land of opportunity, there is opportunity everywhere. But yet the
Mhm.
starting point and
Yeah.
the starting line
Yes.
is the disparity. Is
Agreed.
and this is just nothing that Coach V is like so smart and figured out. No, we all know that.
Yeah.
But where it is that we are today, if there was a corner,
Hmm.
like we're turning in that corner where like Fortune 500 companies back in 2000, half of them aren't even around anymore. And I mean, let's just think of like the blockbusters. Not only has the industries changed in terms of access, equitability, right? Like equal opportunity to access opportunity is more available today than
Hmm.
it ever has. And if there
Agreed.
was a time where race is not um, the main factor versus now what it actually should be, which is bringing value to the marketplace. If you
Agreed.
could bring value to the marketplace, like a guy like me who could speak on a high level and really galvanize a culture of a company and move it forward, though I don't have any experience or expertise in that industry, that they could see value in a Tongan brother named Billy that we could see in Utah of all places, a
Yeah.
black owned bank,
Yeah.
right? And then offering opportunity and impacting the community and leveling up everything it touches. Come on, what's your final on that? I love that.
Oh my gosh. We live in the land of opportunity.
Right.
I believe that miracles can happen. If you put the right people, right, in that room, the power center, right?
Mm,
And I'm always looking, I've always just been fascinated with power when it comes to a higher power, when it comes to being empowered, when it comes
mm,
to leveraging power within whatever power structure you may be operating in to achieve particular outcomes, right?
right.
And just, to your point that you brought up earlier, okay, for Black and Brown, right, this includes our Pacific Islander brothers and sisters
Right.
starting our own businesses or even launching our careers. Oftentimes we start off at a deficit, right, meaning
Real
we
talk.
lack
Not
the.
even at balance or
I'm
zero,
not talking
right?
about
We're at a
economics,
deficit. I love how you said that.
capital. Yeah, right. I mean, that deficit could be mindset. It could be confidence. It could be belief that we can do it because there are not a lot of models that look like us. And
Right.
so it spans all of those things, including the capital piece too, though. And so one of the reasons why Utah has such a strong economy, there's a lot of family-owned businesses and generational wealth that
Mm-hmm.
exists here that has been passed down for decades, right?
Right.
Whereas if you look at a lot of Black families and Pacific Islander families, we may not sit in such a stable, financially stable position, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where we kind of find ourselves struggling. You talk about struggle a lot, and I embrace it, embrace struggle, right? Because through that leads to growth. You end up with growth. And so, anyways, just recognizing these things, more people as positions of power in leadership is starting to become more and more diverse.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to recognize companies and governments, right? That's where the policy piece comes in, and making those adjustments to make sure that we're opening opportunity and access to capital, to education, to healthcare, to all of these things that are going to empower those marginalized communities that have historically been denied these opportunities and access that have rightfully been theirs. So that's
Oh, that.
inspiring to me. It gives us hope, right? And to see whatever level of shift we're starting to see, again, we could do more.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we're going to, but we need all hands on deck. Everyone
yeah, yeah,
listening
yeah.
today, we need you to play your part. We can't do it alone.
That's phenomenal. So, University of Utah, talk about that experience, then going to
Mm,
DC. Let's talk about some of the life lessons you learned from graduating, getting your master's, going to DC on Capitol Hill, rubbing shoulders with the world's elite leaders. Um, And just talk about that whole deal and give some of us that are regular folks just some insight into the workings of coming from Utah, going to DC, and seeing it all unfold by being in the midst of it.
I really, really appreciate that question because I do have a unique experience. In my experience at University of Utah. Also want to note, I'm as regular as they come.
Mm,
And I always make it a point to note that because honestly, if I could do it, anyone can do this, right?
mm,
It's just the difference is hard work. It's who you come in contact with. You know what I mean? Who sits in your network. And so it's really, really important to develop those skills to build social capital. And that's what we're championing at Zions Bank. Our tagline is basically building economic inclusion by opening opportunity, increasing access, and investing our capital. When we say capital, we mean three things. It's human capital, the people, social capital, the trust relationships that you build amongst your team with your clients, ultimately the communities that we serve, and thirdly, that financial capital, your
mm-hmm.
monetary investments. Now, making that statement, going back to my college experience, I had a whole host of older white male, conservative and progressive, everything in between, leaders, professors, mentors, invest in me early on in my career. And one of the reasons why is because I was the only, sometimes the only
Mm,
woman, oftentimes the only person of color in a lot of my political science classes. And so they would, I don't want to say pick on me, but they would give me opportunities to share my perspective because they recognize that whenever you're serving in a public sector role, a government role, your audience is everybody, so you don't have the luxury of excluding certain groups, right? So through that experience, I was able to build healthy, trusting, meaningful, productive relationships with older white conservative men. And if you look at the disparities that oftentimes exist in our country and society, it's between people of color and it's between older white men, generally conservative men. I don't have those biases, right? When I
right.
see older white men, I see them as my partners, as my colleagues, as my friends, right? It's a different perception. And experience. So I step into that arena feeling very comfortable and confident in navigating those circles because I was socially conditioned to do
Mm-hmm.
that in undergrad, So when I moved back east to Washington, D.C., which, Washington is still very much dominated by white men, um, it I was able to do it easier than some of my other women of color counterparts, if you will, because I'd been there, you know what I mean? And so it's a different dynamic. So learning how to, again, build that social capital and navigate different social circles is, I would argue, one of the most key differentiators and leadership traits that will determine the difference between a good leader and a great one,
Mm,
right? Just any kind of regular leader and a visionary leader. And so it's all about the social capital. Financial capital will come and go. And I learned this back in Washington as well. But if the trust is not there, if people don't like you, they don't want to bring you into their circle, they can't vouch for you. You know what I mean? It's all about trust. The money will come, when the relationships are where they need to be to build a solid foundation for whatever it is you're trying to launch, be it a bank, a business, or even a project. But it really just matters so much. I can't emphasize that enough. And hey, as Polynesians, Pacific Islanders, we do that
that's
naturally.
our jive. That's
We
our
are
jam right there.
natural, inclusive leaders. We want to bring everybody to the table as long
Yep.
as there's good food there, right?
That's
And
right.
food can be the
Who
most
called this
powerful
meeting and there's
unifier.
no food here? Who did that? Who did that? Right. No doubt.
Exactly.
So, and that's one of the, I mean, that's my first t-shirt in my store, my website, we're redoing my website and everything. And the first, we got a store for Coach V store with coffee mugs. And the first
Cool.
saying that's going on every coffee mug and t-shirt I sell says there's money in the transaction, but the wealth is in the relationships. Come
Mm.
on. Come
Oh
on,
my
Sui
gosh, I
Lang,
resonate with that so much, so
right?
much.
Good, good. Now coming back home, in your childhood home, you went to school there. Let's highlight and talk about the goodness that's going on in Salt Lake City. Drop names, talk about companies, especially those that are like us. They look like us. They talk like us, right? They talk about that. Let's highlight Salt Lake City and Utah.
Oh my gosh, you're so funny. I feel like, and this was me, my experience in Washington, my daughter and I lived on Capitol Hill for 13 years, and we very much felt at home there.
Mm-hmm.
It was a vastly different experience from Utah in all the right ways, right? I
Mm-hmm.
finally felt like part of the majority. And for any person of color, experiencing what it feels like to be a part of a racial majority is very empowering. And so if you have not experienced that, please. Move to wherever you need to gain that experience, because moving back to Utah, initially I was kind of dragging my feet because I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to that. You know, it's exhausting. You live in California, so you just step out your front door, it's diversity, you know?
That's right. That's right.
In Utah, we had to be very strategic and intentional and seek it out. And we have to build it. We have to create it, you know, and get creative. And so I was kind of dragging my feet, but now it's been about 5 years since we've been back in Utah's community. I'm like Utah's biggest champion. I'm trying to encourage, well, kind of encourage and not encourage people to move to our state, because we now have rush hour here. Our housing market is really, well, it's all the Californians moving to Utah that are killing our housing market.
Why
So
do
Utah can't
Californians
afford to buy
always
homes in
get
Utah.
blamed for the overpopulation of the states next to us? Idaho,
Because it's
Idaho,
true. Because it's
Utah,
true.
come on. Right.
I mean, it's true, you know, hashtag
Yep.
true. But I can't say enough positive things about my experience here in the Beehive State. From the Governor Cox. He has been a phenomenal leader. He identifies as Republican, but he very much resonates with next generation. He's so committed to social, racial, economic inclusion, racial equity, all of those things. He appointed a senior advisor to him on equity and opportunity, who's a dear friend and sister of mine in community. Her name is Nubia Pena. And my boss, right, Scott Anderson. He's the president and CEO of Zions Bank. Last year, he was the chair of the American Bankers Association. He is a very well-respected leader, not just in Utah, but in our industry across the country. It is truly an honor to work for this man, and he's the number one reason why I accepted the offer here at Zions Bank. Oftentimes, leaders in my role in corporate America find themselves having to convince their C-suite or their CEOs to get on board with something. I find myself in a different position. The decision has already been made far too many, you know, at the CEO level to invest. And all I have to do is step in, build bridges, host convenings, you know, facilitate conversations. And that's just like a dream come true. I describe it as dream boss, dream job, doing the work I've always dreamed of. So those are some key players here in the state. And Nubia Pena is to Governor Cox, as I am to Scott Anderson. She's in the public arena. I'm in the private sector. Zions Bank is very influential business in Utah's economy. I also want to note the Salt Lake Chamber. It's one of the most powerful chambers in the country. And we just started our legislative session today. We have the shortest legislative session in the nation. It's 45 days of craziness and madness, but we get a lot of stuff done. We pass a lot of bills and a lot of conversations. People are working around the clock. So the Salt Lake Chamber plays a critical role in preparing our community leaders to step into those conversations. And one thing to note, a lot of my professional experience has been working in Utah and Washington, D.C. Obviously, there are a lot of differences, right, between the environments, the demographics, the leadership, but also the values. So as I would describe Washington, D.C., the East Coast, they value, right, it's wealth, it's status, it's perceptions, you know, things like that, building their careers, things like that. Here in Utah, I feel we value faith, family, community, right? And if you build out a government or community society with those values and guiding principles, that has led to a more long-term sustainable economy. And so I've just really been inspired by that, right? Just looking at the differences in how we view and utilize power as well. Here in Utah, everyone wants to help everybody else. It's like, there's no, that scarcity deficit mindset that we see far too often in the corporate arena.
Yep.
And far too often in politics as well, back in Washington, where it doesn't really exist here. Like, our legislators really get along with each other across the aisle. They're friends. In business, we want to help others succeed, not just ourselves. And we recognize that if we all succeed and help lift each other up, we will rise as a community. And so it's been really, really inspiring to see that. And maybe it's because I've lived in Washington for 13 years, I'd become a cynic.
Right.
So I describe Utah as like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. People are so nice here, like almost to the point where it was annoying at first. So I'm like, what is this? Yeah. But now I'm embracing it because it is sincere, it is authentic, and it's the manner in which we do business, and it works. So numbers don't.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love that. I love that. And thank you for sharing that. And I love your perspective on the values of a geographic region that's based
Yeah.
on its people, demographics, age, but the focus, right, is actually the values and the sustainability between trying to get ahead, what's in it for me, status versus
Yeah.
faith, family, and community.
Mm-hmm.
And you said the sustainability because
Yeah.
of really it's a really people rooted approach
Mm-hmm.
to winning and succeeding, developing and leveling up your family, your community. I think everybody wins. So I do appreciate that comparison and,
Mm-hmm.
conveyed in a way that's real talk. That's just some
Yeah.
real talk. In that, let's take this. Okay, born in Hawaii, right? Dad Abraham, Hawaiian boy. Dolores Filipino,
Mm-hmm.
right? Pinay, she's a Pinay in the 808. Grew up in Utah, went to school in Utah. Years in DC. Now coming back to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Executive, woman of color in the state of Utah and in Salt Lake. What's your message to the world? If you
Oh,
combined all of those experiences, what would be your message to the world?
oh my gosh, V. One word: love.
Mm,
And this may sound silly, but that tends to be a word that is not oftentimes used in corporate America or
mm,
in the workplace. But I have heard it used here at Zions Bank multiple times in leadership meetings, in team meetings, in conversations that we host through our employee business forums and internal programming here at the bank. And it's unifying. A lot of the work that I do can be emotionally and mentally taxing
mm.
and exhausting. I mean, I'm really hitting people's sensitivities, talking
Right,
about race,
right.
gender, power, right? Faith, like all of these things can bring up stuff, right? In people. And so I am oftentimes the target. And so I have to figure out processes, rituals, literally to maintain my mental health. How can I receive what this person is bringing to me or to the table, process it, and release it, right? That's a healthy practice, mental health practice that I would say any DEI practitioner or even leader, period, should consider developing for themselves. But I continue to be inspired by the people who do see me and see the value that I bring to the table. And I
Mm,
would say the best way to foster that is to model it. I strive, right, to see the value everybody brings to the table. Whether or not they like me, agree with me, disagree with me, that shouldn't matter, right? Everyone brings value to the table. So starting with love and then identifying that which makes you different is what makes you valuable. And so everyone serves a purpose. Everyone has a purpose here in whatever role they may be serving in, and just on earth, period. The sooner you can identify what your purpose is and find ways to live out that purpose, then there's no competition, right? There's no I call it competitive comparison, which can oftentimes be very, very toxic when you start comparing yourself to others and why not me and blah, blah, blah. Well, no, I mean, they have a role to fulfill that only they can fulfill. And same for you. And those inspired, purposeful, purpose-driven leaders are rarely concerned about all the other things that don't matter, right? They're just mission-driven and focused on carrying out their purpose. And you'll just find more joy in life, and you'll find more success in your role as well.
I love that. I love that. So you got the legislative sessions going on right now. Thank you for sharing your message of love. Identify the difference, that which makes you valuable. Let me say that again.
That which makes you
SLPs.
different
Yep.
is what makes you valuable.
Yeah. That identify that which makes you different, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Which equates to what makes you valuable, correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Very good. I love that. And it's really interesting too, because so many times it's thrown around, well, you have to love what you do. Because if you don't love what you
Please.
do, you'll never be great at it. And I start with, you better love you first.
Yeah.
Because people
Yeah.
that don't love, appreciate, and accept themselves, there's no way that they can love, appreciate, and accept other people. Come on,
Agreed.
SLP, come on.
Agreed.
Come on.
Agreed.
You
It's
better
not
love your
fair.
people. You
Yeah.
better love the industry and service, because no, you will get worn out. But when you love something and are passionate about something, you will rest, rejuvenate,
It's not work.
and then show up tomorrow and start again. Because
Agreed.
those that don't love it will quit. And it is so easy. They'll see an easier way and a better way. And because they're, and I'm not saying that purpose and purpose alone, because I do think the who is so important. Like the who you're doing it for, the who that's you and the who that you're doing, right? And then when you talk about like loving the customer or client, I bring that up, especially in paramilitary organizations that I coach, teach, and train. Shout out to the 8 States Chiefs Conference. I'll be there September 28th in Idaho, in Boise, Idaho. I'll be with them. And I talk about love, right? And a lot of these older white male leaders in paramilitary organizations, like, yeah, that's a great concept, but I gave the order, they got to do it.
Right? Good for you. I love that.
Yeah, but when you come from a place of care and concern, and respect for a person's humanity above what it is that they can perform and or bring value to the bottom line of an organization, the dynamics change. And for the better. And not because Coach V says so, right? Or SLP says so. This is what Life Leadership Business, the Harvard Business Review, everyone who feels appreciated, cared, and concerned for, love. That's love, right? They just perform on higher levels, and the fundamental principles that make up high-performing organizations, that's the heart of it. Love. Wow, what a concept.
I mean, it really is. It's not groundbreaking. It's just, it's true. And one thing I just want to say about self-love that you noted, self-love and self-care is not selfish.
That's right. Say that again for all of us. I need to remember that too. Come on, say that again, SLP.
Self-love and self-care is not selfish, right? It's preparing yourself to perform at your best and to better support the community and people around you. But you have to take care of self first. And far too often, leaders are just deprived of that,
Yeah.
And then we're exhausted to the point of exhaustion, to where we can't lead anymore, and the entire movement suffers. You know what I mean? Right. And so please do us a favor. Take care of self, and then you don't start snapping at people left and right, Sometimes
that's right. And not only are you less does your performance suffer, your relationship suffer in the job, but
Agreed.
you actually have less than leftovers to give your family at home. Let me say
That
that again.
too.
Not
Mm,
only does the business suffer and the organization suffer, but you
mhm,
actually give less than the leftovers to the
mhm.
family when you get home. Am I talking
Amen to
some
that.
real talk, SLP?
Amen to that. Amen to that. And I want
Yeah,
to say
that's just
this
some real
too.
talk.
Another reason why Utah's thriving economically is because of the family unit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We are starting to see a deterioration of the family unit across America. And so we really value preserving that family unit. And that is the foundation of a strong economy
Yeah.
and community.
So this Tongan brother, I've never been LDS. Now I've gone to so many LDS events that I've went to church on Sunday at Ontario 7th Ward, and they were like, "Hey man, we're short people for sacrament. Can you pass?" And I'm like, "Bro, I'm not a member. I'm not. You're not a member."
It's
But
hilarious.
but one of the things, though, my wife and I, we go to a Christian church. We go to Thrive Church here in Elk Grove, California. Is
Cool.
we don't call it family home evening, but
Yeah.
we do family home evening
Yeah.
multiple times during the week,
Awesome.
where we sit and read together. We share about our day. Hey, uh, good job on your volleyball tournament. Thank you for getting A's instead of B's. I just think that concept from that I've experienced, it's still called family home evening. Yes,
Mhm.
SLP?
Sure. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
sure. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just think that's a concept that from the family unit
yep,
of
totally.
getting together, what a concept. Communicating, expressing appreciation. Hey, here's something that I would like for us to work on. I think that's phenomenal. Talk to us about not just the 45 days of legislative meetings that you guys are embarking on in the midst of, but what are some projects that we can look forward to SFP working on and Zion's Bank?
Oh my gosh. Well, I can share a little bit about the community partnerships that I'm currently managing.
Yeah, please.
So the first one, small businesses is our bread and butter. We are the number one small business lender in our market and have been for like 27 years.
Right.
And so one thing that we want to support small businesses in any way that we can. Not every small business has the capacity to hire like me, an FTE, full-time dedicated employee to run diversity, equity, inclusion, talk about people and culture and all of those things. So we designed an offering. It's a 6-session offering for small business leaders to come in and be trained on how to develop a strategy, how to
Mm,
strengthen your culture, how to create inclusive policies, how to empower employees, employee development and leadership and all those things. And so they can go back to their small businesses and continue to be leaders in this space, and whether you have 5 employees or 5,000 employees, you play a critical role in building an inclusive culture in the
mm.
community and your organizations, as well as the world's most inclusive economy, right? And we're seeing strides in corporate America like we've never seen before. So that's just one. And I just love engaging with small business owners and leaders in our community. And oftentimes people serve in both roles, and hearing their stories and just sharing best practices, bringing value to the people that we serve, right? So there's that one partnership. Another one is Utah ranks 50th in the nation and has for the past 8 years last on women's equality. So
Mm,
according to this study that Wallet Hub conducts every year, Utah continues to fall last in the nation, number 50 when it comes to women's equality. And so things
mm.
like that keep people like my boss, like our governor, like Derek Miller, the Salt Lake Chamber up at night, right? How can we move the needle on this?
Right.
There are a number of factors that go into how they came up with those results. And so we only are going to, put our focus on that so much, right? The ultimate goal is not to necessarily improve our standing on a list, but to really improve women's experiences in the state of Utah. So when it comes to pay equity, when it comes to representation in public office, these are all examples of things that we can improve on, right? That has kept us at the bottom. but we also want to acknowledge the important family roles and volunteer roles that women play in our community
That's
that
right.
also contribute to the foundation of our economy. And so there are a lot of things that women are doing and thriving at in the state of Utah that are not part of the data that they collect when they rank states. And so we're being very kind of mindful of that. But when it comes to education, corporate experience, corporate culture, and political representation, those are the 4 or 3 key areas in which we can improve on women's equality. So Zions Bank has invested in the research. So data and research is key, when it comes to policy making, because that informs our decisions on women's equality research. And so we partnered with Utah Women Leadership Project to produce this report, Women's Equality Report, offering recommendations on how we can improve. So what we've been doing over the past couple of years is hosting convenings of influencers and leaders across the state, from Capitol Hill all the way to the business community and nonprofit advocacy organizations, to have conversations and developing a blueprint for solving for women's equality in the Beehive State. And so I've seen just a lot of just groundbreaking ideas, strategies that currently are being developed on how we can really truly improve the lives and experiences of women in our state. So that's just one example of another community partnership. The other one is Redemption Bank that I mentioned earlier. So really having a voice at Zions Bank, being a leader. We are considered a super regional community bank within
Mm-hmm.
our industry. And so we're small enough to care, big enough to matter.
Mm,
We own 8 community banks across 11 Western states and valued at about 92 billion. And
mm,
so we have grown significantly over the past, I'd say 50, 60 years.
mm-hmm.
And we use that growth to invest in our communities, the communities that we serve. And so now a bank like Zions having a voice in the national conversation in the industry, as well as being a champion for investing in MDIs, right? And supporting smaller banks is, again, also critical to our success as a nation. And then the last one is a project called She Money, which is championed by Jackie Zahner, she describes herself as a financial feminist, right? And for
Right.
women, we are still, there's a lot of opportunity to grow in the banking, financial services, and economic empowerment space. And so She Money invests in women-owned businesses, offering trainings, networking opportunities. We just produced a spend guide to inspire intentional spending. And what it is, it's 70 women-owned businesses in this little booklet, little guide. It's a profile of all the women-owned businesses, or 70 of them in the Beehive State. And just, here they are. So, how people are like championing buy Black, buy brown, buy
Right.
women, invest in women, And so we're moving the needle on that space as well. So a lot of exciting programs and projects that I personally have not seen in other states that are, considered to be more progressive than the state of Utah. But I'm very, very optimistic about the role that we play as a bank, as a pillar in the community, and as a state in the bigger picture around building economic inclusion in this country. So.
Those exciting projects, exciting projects. You have the final word. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Just go ahead and take 30 seconds to a minute and just the final word on just being on the show and your shout outs. Who would you like to shout out here on the Coach V Show?
Oh my gosh, I just want to express my gratitude to you, Coach V, for this opportunity. I
Oh,
want to
it's
thank all
easy.
of your yeah, all of your guests who have chosen to tune in today. And I just love this space that you have created. And me, as a woman who identifies as Pacific Islander, first and foremost, I have to admit that's oftentimes not the majority of the social and professional networks that I'm in, right?
Yep.
And so this is special and unique to me. And my heart is always with our community first. And so
Mm.
thank you for inviting me into this space. I feel honored to be a part of your Ohana. And if any of you are ever in Salt Lake City, I would love to host you and show you what Utah has to offer.
So thank you, Sui Lang Panoke, for coming on the Coach V Show all the way from Utah. And we got to find a way where we can connect in studio, on Hollywood Boulevard Dash Radio, where you could come down and we could get a show going sometime next year, and as we go into now 2024 next year. But thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're super busy, but for you to take the time to come on this platform with Island City Media Group, where the beach meets the streets, where, I mean, it is our sole focus for this Polynesian, island-centric, islander, Asian focus to really enhance and really show people out there that don't know that there's an SLP out there and they're striving to be like that. Like, hey, here you
Yeah.
go. It's not impossible. And it doesn't mean I love what you said. It's like you're a normal person that's worked hard and has consistently went after her goals, and now you're living your American dream. So thank you for coming on the show. And for SLP and your boy Coach V, we just don't do shows like this for the sake of success, but really for the sake that you be your best. In doing so, you realize the best of your abilities and that everything that you dream, work, and pray for can be achieved. This how your girl SLP and your boy Coach V lives, all about faith and family. Grateful for God's amazing grace. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Coach V Show. Shout out to the ICMG Island City Media Group family, where the beach meets the streets. We will see you next Mana Motivation Monday here on the Coach V Show, where iron sharpens iron. Together we rise. Choo!
Aloha. Malahalo nui loa.